Chris Tucker, who will be on the second half hour, is the communications director from Energy in Depth. Chris.
Yes, sir. Hey, Gary.
Good morning, Chris. I know you know Travis. Chris.
Good morning. Travis and I go way back.
Yeah.
Actually, we both worked in the same office there for a congressman that represented Clearfield County. Yeah,
let's go ahead and tell our listeners how they might remember the two of you. And who was that gentleman?
Well, the guy was a guy named John Peterson.
Yeah.
Represented the district for about, 12 years.
Yes.
And, I worked for him for 2 or 3 years, actually, in Washington. And when I moved on to work for a gentleman representing the 7th District of Missouri, Travis came in and was my successor in that job, and got plenty of time to travel around the sprawling 5th District of Pennsylvania, 13,000 square miles, and I'm sure spent a lot of time in Clearfield just like I did.
Okay, and I know you ventured through DuBois a time or two.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We paved a few roads since you were here. Okay, I'm going to let Travis, anything finally from you that you would like to add?
I know we hear a lot of questions say, hey, we're seeing Wyoming tags and Texas tags on cars. How do I get one of these jobs? I'm from Clearfield County. I'm from Clinton County. I want to get one of these jobs. Well, I'd encourage everyone listening and for folks that know family members, friends that are interested in getting involved with our industry, to visit our webpage, marcelluscoalition.org. We have a whole jobs portal there, and like I said at the outset, we have right now the MSC has nearly 165 member companies, and on our jobs page, every one of those companies has all of their openings listed there. So
that's job portal?
The jobs portal, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I checked that website. I'm not looking for a job, but I know, and this is a plug for our Penn State DuBois campus. They've become very responsive to the need for the Marcellus industry here, and actually have courses developed that you can call them and find out about, and you can get those jobs with good training here at Penn State DuBois.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's similar programs over in Center County. There's a great article in the Center Daily Times on Sunday. 19-year-old kid out of high school was delivering pizzas a couple months ago, and he's making $55,000 a year now working for Halliburton. So there's plenty of job opportunities out there similar to that. They're going to be here for decades, and everyone says whether it's the guy or girl that drills the last Marcellus well probably isn't born yet. So this is really a long-term commitment.
Okay, thanks so much, Travis, for taking your time.
And, hey, we'll be thinking about you.
All right, thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye. All right, Travis is gone. It's your show now, Chris.
Turn the keys over, huh?
Yeah, the keys are in your pocket and leading me through this fight. So I want to be here in 10 years and see if any of my neighbors drill a Marcellus natural gas well under my property. Sure. And that's one thing, Chris, I have to say I am totally in favor of the Marcellus gas industry, and I'm not totally in favor of very much. But the things I don't like is that someone, a half a mile down the road can drill a well, and they're getting the gas from under my measly little 5 acres. How's that work?
Yeah. The situation there, it's and Travis would know a little bit more about this because he's specific to Pennsylvania. Our campaign's nationally focused. I am from Pennsylvania, though, so I do spend a lot of time up there.
We won't hold that against you.
I'm actually from the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton corner of the state, so known as the most corrupt, as we know. Anyway, but in terms of the, I think you're talking about pooling, essentially. This concept of, this was something that was put in place in the States really 150 years ago. I mean, it was actually a function. It was an outgrowth of what we saw in Titusville in 1859, and then continuing on through Oil Creek, the world's first ever oil well. Basically, what you'd have is folks drilling well on top of well on top of well on top of well, and trying to steal each other's oil, initially oil, and then eventually natural gas. This concept of really just zero planning. And the idea is if someone found some oil, across the street, you were drilling twice as hard and trying to suck that thing out and trying to drain the reservoir so that you can get that oil, and there you go. And that's how it was. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that was an environmental. Frankly, it was just poor. It was poor planning, and it led to really bad environmental outcomes. You can't, and oh, by the way, efficiency outcomes, because you had people drilling literally on top of each other, wells within feet of each other, and trying to drill the same resource right beneath your feet. And so the issue there was there had to be a situation to pool different landowners together, and so that you create a plot so that one operator can come there, produce the resource in a sort of orderly way, and do that in a way that's going to sort of minimize environmental impact. And so that's where pooling came about. It was actually a conception that was first created by the environmental movement and supported by the environmental movement as a way to sort of conserve the resource and do it, and again, produce it in an orderly fashion. So that's kind of how it came to be. In the context of Marcellus, you have a situation here where we have one well that goes down, or at least one pad on the surface, and then you have several wells right there going into the earth. 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 feet down. Then they of course turn, and those wells are going horizontal at that point. And the thing now becomes a question of, well, do we want to drill on top of another? Do we want to drill on top of each other in this context too to try to get this natural gas, which it doesn't make sense economically. It certainly doesn't make sense environmentally. So basically, what the situation is now is that we're trying to put together plots. We're trying to put together 640-acre plots and larger plots as well. And from that, go to the landowners and say, hey, here's a situation. We don't actually have to drill on your property. You won't see a rig. You won't see a road. You won't see anything. But if you give us the opportunity to produce the resources at 7,000 feet below your driveway, well, then we can enter in an agreement, and you can get a check every month. And so that's kind of what the conception's been moving forward here. And again, it's one of those things where it's not. Unfortunately, it's sort of looked at as like, oh, you're stealing our gas. No one's stealing anyone's gas. As it currently stands, if you don't want that natural gas to be produced, you have pretty much the opportunity to shut down that entire project for your neighbors too. We don't think that's fair as well. So there has to be a way to sort of kind of quote unquote split the baby in half on this one, and that's really what's being talked about right now in Harrisburg.
Okay, Chris Nancy called when Travis was on with us. And she apparently is one of those property owners that owns the surface but doesn't own the mineral rights. And I could tell that she was in a heart-to-heart battle over encroachment on her land when she doesn't own what's underneath. So I know you're not an attorney either, Chris, but where are these legal issues headed when they want to build a road across my property, or
no, it's true.
They want to do
let me
this?
Just say, Gary, there's no ideology I know of that would support the notion that just because you don't own your mineral rights, someone else can go in and do whatever they want to your land. That's ridiculous. And so, this is actually an issue that we've had since FDR days. To pay for the New Deal in part, a lot of the mineral rights were separated from the surface rights. Some of that went to government, some of that went to private interests. That's the reason why, the Allegheny National Forest is a good example. It's a federal forest, but guess what? Private mineral owners, private interests own a good bit of those minerals underneath the ground. And so you have this this separation phenomenon in the east and certainly out west as well. And the good news is that we've had this now in place. This has been a system in place. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't like that. Quite honestly, I wish it was the case that everyone owned the mineral and the surface, so that we wouldn't have any problems. Of course, maybe the lawyers disagree with me because they've made a business out of this for the past 60 years. So the good news is that there actually is fairly straightforward stricture as it relates to what happens here and who does what and how. If you own the surface rights and not the mineral rights, you do have to provide. There has to be fair use, the ability for fair use. The person that owns the mineral rights has to be able to access those minerals in a way that is not overly intrusive of your rights as well. That's the balance that needs to be struck. A lot of those things end up in front of the magistrate. But the good news is that actually there isn't a whole lot of gray area here. There are standards. There are objective standards that be judged according to. And so it's unfortunately one of those things where it's usually a situation where you have to talk to a lawyer, you have to talk to a magistrate, and you have to go from there. But again, it's not a new phenomenon. It's been around for decades and decades and decades. And unfortunately, it's never an easy thing to sort of split.
Okay, with us on the line now is Chris from the different organization. He is not affiliated with the Marcellus Shale Coalition. I think it's appropriate that we jumped right into a conversation with you, and you didn't get to tell us who you work for and what you do there.
Sure. Yeah, Gary, I work for a group called Energy in Depth, and it's an education and outreach initiative that we created a couple of years ago, working with IPAA, which is the Independent Petroleum Association of America. Those are the folks that represent the mom and pop oil and gas producers across the country, folks who average payroll includes 12 folks, and some of the smaller guys, they only do the exploration and production. Some companies do the whole thing. They'll produce the oil, they'll put it in a pipeline, they'll refine it, and they'll sell it to you at the gas station. They control the entire stream. These guys, the group that we're working with, is just an upstream organization, just doing the production. And so, as you can imagine, specifically on issues related to hydraulic fracturing and the technology we need to produce these resources, they're very important to them, especially because that's their lifeblood. That technology, and especially in the context of shale development, this is what allows independents to continue to survive in this current environment where everyone's merging and there's a tendency to go bigger as opposed to smarter. So, the reality is that shale phenomenon in general. I mean, we talk about the Marcellus, but it's not only a national phenomenon; it's an international phenomenon, and it was actually started by independents in Oklahoma, in Texas. And really, starting about 30 years ago was when the first shale well. They started drilling the first shale well and see if they could actually squeeze some gas out of there. So,
and it worked, obviously, and it worked.
Well, it didn't work initially, Gary. It didn't work initially.
Oh, it didn't. Okay.
Yeah. But we had hydraulic fracturing technology that's been around for 60 years. That alone was not going to crack the code. You needed the combination of hydraulic fracturing technology and the horizontal drilling that allowed this to happen.
Yeah.
And so once those two combined, late 90s in the Barnett Shale in Dallas-Fort Worth, that's when those first wells started to come online, and the numbers just blew everyone's hair back. And really, at that moment, we've always known about the Marcellus. It's 390 million years old. It's been there forever. We always known about it, but at that moment we knew we would have an opportunity to produce these resources that we had a sense might be here.
Hey, you've triggered some phone calls. Good morning. You're on the air on Contact. Our topic today, Marcellus Shale natural gas.
Yes, I remember about 50 years ago we had gas drilling, that consolidated gas out toward Luthersburg. What I'm wondering then is, since we've had it that long ago, why is it such a problem now? Okay,
thanks for calling, and turn up your radio. What's the deal? What's different about then and now, Chris?
Yeah, it's a great question because, we're going around now and again through Pennsylvania, and I go up into New York. Again, our organization is national, so I'm all over the place. But when I'm in Pennsylvania, it's interesting because they'll bring this concept up. Oh, it's Marcellus, it's natural gas, it's brand new, using new technology. It's never been done before, and I sort of scratch my head because Pennsylvania's been an oil and gas state for 150 years. There are currently 55,000 natural gas wells in the state of Pennsylvania. 55,000 active natural gas wells, and of those, maybe about 800 of them are active Marcellus wells in terms of the actual developing natural gas right now. So keep in mind, it's a small fraction. This Marcellus thing, but that very small number is still responsible for producing between 70 and 80% of all the natural gas in Pennsylvania right now. Some even say up to 90%, depending on the day. So keep in mind, 55,000 conventional wells, basically accounting for 10% of the gas, and then 750-ish producing Marcellus wells, accounting for 80 to 85. So just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. But specific to your point, you're right. Natural gas has been produced in Pennsylvania for at least the past, oil for 150 years. I think natural gas, I've seen a number of about 110 years. And of course, early on, we didn't really know what to do with it, right? We weren't burning it for electricity. We weren't putting it in vehicles. We weren't using it for your homes. So a lot of it was just flared off. It was avoided like the plague. People just sort of burned it off, and that was it. Then we figured out what we could do with it, and then the infrastructure came on, and that changed a lot. The difference now, quite candidly, Pennsylvania was always an oil and gas producer, but it was never like this. Okay, Pennsylvania is right now ranks 18 in the nation in natural gas production. If the Marcellus numbers are right, if the projections are right, Pennsylvania will be 2 in 10 years.
Behind
only Texas.
By Texas.
Right? That's the kind of resource potential we're talking about. Frankly, that's why it's become controversial. Nothing this transformational has ever happened in the world without picking up a few naysayers along the way. We have potentially in Pennsylvania the second largest natural gas field in the entire world, and so obviously something like that comes online, and you're going to ruffle some feathers along the way. But be assured, the technology has not changed. Hydraulic fracturing has been used in Pennsylvania for 50 years, 60 years. The only thing new is that we're going deeper, and we're going horizontal. And the reason we go horizontal is it's the only way you could economically tap these very tightly packed, diffuse pockets of natural gas. You can't drill well after well after well after well after well. That's bad for the environment. It's bad for, frankly, our bottom line, too. You have to do it with one well, go horizontal, you expose that entire shale formation, you fracture the rock, and it's all coming to the well bore. There's no such thing as a dry hole anymore, which is a sort of an unbelievable moment in this industry's history.
Yes, it is. We have another caller. Good morning. You're on Contact with Chris. We're talking Marcellus Shale natural gas.
Yeah, I had a question. I have a son coming out of college next year. Just wondering, he's coming out with a business and marketing degree. Just wondering if there are any opportunities in the Marcellus Shale industry for that kind of degree, and if so, what other kinds of things should he be looking at to prepare himself for that kind of job, or a job in that field?
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, and we can again refer them to the Marcellus Shale Coalition website for job information, but this is such a huge industry. Chris, I have a feeling they're going to need somebody in every capacity.
Yeah, Gary. And unfortunately, there is a misconception out there that people say, "Oh, you created 80,000 jobs. Good for you." They must be all for the drillers, right? Well, that's not even close to being the case. I mean, the majority of these jobs are folks up and down the supply chain. I mean, I have a philosophy degree. I don't know the first thing. I mean, science, holy mackerel. I took zoology in high school. That's about as far as I got. But essentially, we're talking about in terms of the jobs that are going to be available. There's going to be jobs at the well site, folks working at the wells, doing the drilling, doing everything else. But what about the folks making, and then just from a manufacturing side, what about the folks making the pipe? What about the folks, doing the environmental assessment work? What about the lawyers? What about, what about the land guys and the business guys and everything else? I mean, it's just up and down the supply chain, and that's actually reflected. If you go to the Marcellus Shale website, I've been there a couple times recently just to check up on some stuff. You see who their members are, and you wouldn't even imagine. You would just expect it to be all just oil and gas guys. It's not. Every business is touched by energy, and therefore every part of this every segment, we're going to need workers to kind of come in there with an awareness of what's happening, and just do what you would do in any other industry, frankly. So, if you're talking about someone coming out of high school or coming out of college or going the vocational route, and they come out with a business degree, or something related to marketing or finance, or I have just a liberal arts degree. I got into the communication side of this, but this isn't working in the communication industry here, working for communication side for Marcellus or for other shale plays. It's not like selling tennis shoes, okay? I mean, this is something where you have to go to the well site, you have to understand technical processes, you have to understand, there's a lot of numbers to be gotten out there, there's a lot of sort of research to be done, and it's a very different sort of proposition than going to sort of market Coca-Cola. Okay, so it's a little different concept, but at the same time, this is the growth industry, and because of that, it can't be just growth on one segment and not others. And so I think to answer your question and to answer your listener's question, Gary, the answer is obviously be looking at the jobs portal, but understand also that it's with a quick sort of, you put half an hour research in here, you'll see different segments of this industry and how they all fit together and where there could be potential need for job offerings. I will tell you that that website that Travis mentioned before has postings. I mean, and it's pretty remarkable. I mean, we're talking about, according to one study, we're talking about we created 80,000 jobs in Pennsylvania the past year and a half. They say they're going to create another 211,000. I mean, those jobs have to come somewhere. Someone's going to have to fill those jobs. And every company that's working in this state right now, in Pennsylvania right now, wants those jobs to be filled by Pennsylvanians. It just makes sense across the board. It's good for everybody. So if you're a Pennsylvanian, you're coming out, you have an interest in this industry, you're going to have a target on your back, and we're going to want you to work for us. Apply,
and it is MarcellusCoalition.org, MarcellusCoalition.org. Phone lines open again, 372-1420 for questions. Chris is on the line with me right now. Chris is working in something totally different than his degree, but I know from working with Chris for a number of years, he's good at what he does. Okay, here's my next point I want to bring up, and there is a former Pennsylvania governor that I truly respect, and that's Tom Ridge. And I want to quote former Governor Ridge: "We have one chance to do it right. And I believe that chance is now. And industry-wide, what is the industry saying about this chance to do it right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you have a situation in front of you that people are very concerned. They're concerned that, one, that this is a new technology, that it's unproven, it's unregulated, that they're hearing these things, and it's not true, but, the concerns are real, and they have to be addressed. The one thing that they also hear is that these foreign companies, and by foreign they don't mean from other countries, they mean from Texas. Foreign companies from Texas are coming into the state and just exploiting the gas, taking it, and in the middle of the night, under the cover of darkness, running across the border, and you're never going to see these guys again. It's
wait a minute.
Fly-by-night operation.
Hold up, Chris. Why do most of those trucks travel at night?
Well, I don't know that most of them would travel.
I'm joking. I hear it every day.
Yeah, because a good example. I mean, hydraulic fracturing operations. Most operators in Pennsylvania don't do them at night, just as because there is some noise associated with that. You don't see that in any other state. There are different things being made, accommodations being made right now, because we recognize that the industry recognizes it's uncharted territory. Sure, the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania in 1859, but what the heck has happened over the past 150 years? Those folks who were around in 1859 aren't really around anymore, right? There's not this real deep well of experience here in dealing with this industry. So, but and that's the challenge, frankly. I mean, you talk about getting one chance to get it right. This industry is going to be in Pennsylvania producing this resource for the next 40 years, okay, at least. The reality is that anyone who thinks that we're going to just go in there on the front end and muck up the joint and not put the due diligence in and not put the time in with local communities and start integrating ourselves with local communities, hiring locally, working with schools, working with VOTEC schools, developing our next crop, cultivating our next crop of scientists and engineers and workers and the rest. If anyone, the notion that we wouldn't be doing that is sort of ridiculous. I mean, of course we're going to be doing it. It's an industry going to be here for the next several decades. You talk to folks in Texas who in Oklahoma who came up here and laid out the initial capital for this work to happen. They'd like to go home too now. Their home is in Texas and Oklahoma. They want to turn those jobs over to Pennsylvanians. So that's what the goal across the industry is right now. Bring in the local folks, train the next crop, and make sure that they continue on and carry the mantle here for the next 40 years. The reason we only have one shot to get it right is that it's become an international issue. It's become a political issue. It's become a press issue. We have films on HBO and up for the Oscar, and it's a big deal. I mean, it's just sort of this campaign that's been formed around this notion of stopping this development. And it's no different. It's stopping any development. It doesn't matter that it's natural gas. It could be if Nissan was putting together a plant in DuBois. I mean, you'd still have people oppose that just because it's a question of development, and people question the notion of development.
It's change. It's change. Yeah.
Well, it's change, and it's change, and absolutely it's change, and it's and hey, listen, there's all, as you said before, there are trucks on the road, there's unfamiliar faces in the diners. Maybe it's some. I've heard rent prices increasing. I've heard it's tough to get a hotel room.
It is.
I mean, progress is not in itself. It's progress needs to be managed. Frankly, I mean, it needs to be managed, and you need to sort of grow the pie, or you're going to be, you don't want to be caught in a phone booth on this thing, and everyone's kind of jammed together, and the nature of the town has changed, the culture of the town, the fabric of the town, the community has changed. You need to manage it in the right way. With prosperity comes the sort of the responsibility to manage that in a way that's going to ensure that community doesn't materially and fundamentally and culturally and sort of in its core fabric change so much that you don't recognize it anymore, right? So that's the challenge that these industries have. They're bringing new jobs. They're bringing in millions of new revenue. Family farmers they're able to keep the farm and keep it in the family, and there's some really good stories. But without a full and very serious and frankly comprehensive effort to fully integrate what we're doing into the community and make it part of the fabric in a way that's not going to be in a seamless manner, bringing that in there, and again adding it to the sort of mosaic that is that community. That's the thing, and it's not going to be done overnight, and it's not going to be done with a Twitter account or a press release. It's a door-to-door thing. It's a stool-to-stool thing. It's a diner. It's a pew-to-pew thing in church. I mean, that's the thing we're trying to do right now. It's going to require a lot of folks coming up and again, making full-time residents there, and that's what's happening right now.
Okay, we're going to take a quick 30-second break. Oh, by the way, Chris, I heard from a couple sources that the Marcellus Shell guys are good tippers. Well, we'll be back. We'll be back with a final question in 2 minutes on the show. All right, Chris, so I don't have to cut you off. Look at your watch. You have 2 minutes. What about the movie Gasland?
I'll tell you, it's up for an Oscar in the documentary category. I think that this will be the first movie up for Oscar that I've actually watched. I've had to watch it more than anyone else. I've watched it 15 times. I've had to watch it to debunk it, to go through and point by point, stop it, start it, stop it, start it, because there's so many things that are wrong. We put together a 5,300-word rebuttal to the film in June. We've updated it since. We've put out a couple other things as well. We wrote to the Academy. Believe it or not, we wrote to the Academy, the folks that are going to be voting for Oscar. We sent a letter out to them last week basically saying, hey, in your own definition, the criteria that you cite on your website for films that would be eligible for this Oscar, you say that it must be based on truth. It has to be factual. It cannot be fiction. And so, we're not the only ones that have sort of pointed out the fiction in the film. Even former DEP Secretary John Hanger, of course, on the other, a Democrat and for Democratic administration, former CEO of the top environmental organization in Pennsylvania, Penn Future. He's called the filmmaker a propagandist. He's said it deliberately seeks to misinform. And so, listen, I mean, it is what it is. The filmmaker has still never actually been to a frack job, so he's, of course, the expert, right, on this, but he's actually never been to an active well site. So, it is what it is, unfortunately, and we're going to have to deal with it, but it's been tough. I mean, it's a film that has, I hear about it when I'm in Quebec. I hear about it when I'm in Calgary. I hear about it when I'm in Wyoming. I hear about it when I'm in Texas. I hear about it when folks call me from Australia and folks call me from, England and everywhere else. And so, it's had an effect. It absolutely has, and it just speaks to the task we have ahead of us. We have our work cut out for us. We have, thankfully, the facts on our side, but we have to put the work in to get them out.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Chris. It's always a privilege, and we'll probably do this again in about 3 months because there will be more wells, more questions, more concerns, and we'll know if the movie wins an award by then. Have a great day.
Thanks, Gary. We're praying for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so